All right, welcome back to part 2 of chapter 3. This is where we ended about how the membrane or the cell is called selectively permeable. What that means is your cells don't let everything in them either at once or at all, sort of like your home. You might let family and friends in, but you're definitely not letting that weirdo in that's been walking back and forth in front of your street, right? So you have a door and you only allow certain people in. Well, that's how a cell is. It allows water and oxygen freely to go in and out, but anything else needs to either have a certain sort of key to get in or a certain helper to help them in the cell. Not everything can go in all the time or even at once. And that's called selectively permeable, like you're selective of letting who's in your home. That's what that means. So that's how cells are, and that's how their organelles inside are. So how do you let them in? Well, think about this. I think we all want to go to Disney and be in the lazy river, where you sit in a tube and you just float around. Well, things in the cell that move in and out do that as well. That's called passive transport, just like you passively floating around. You don't have to do any extra energy, which thank goodness going on the lazy river. So it's passive transport. But maybe you and your family rented the cabana and have all this great food, and you just missed the exit ramp to get off your tube on the lazy river. So now you're going against the stream to get to the ramp to get to your cabana. You're putting a lot of work. So do you work against that rapid, or do you sit on the tube and float around another 20 minutes? Well, if you're hungry like I am, you get off the tube and fight against the rapids. That's called active transport. Some things going in the cell have to go against a concentration, like you're going against that rapid to get to the cabana. So it's active transport requiring energy. Inside of the cell, here's that cell membrane again. This is the outside the cell, this is the inside the cell, and things move back and forth. And they naturally move from a higher concentration to a lower concentration till they're equal on both sides. Like your Lipton tea mix or your Kool-Aid mix. When you take that powdered mix and put it into water, you see a big chunk of color and it starts to kind of wean itself out until it's all the same color, right? Well, that's what this is, the higher concentration to a lower concentration until it's equal. Now, we could let the tea or the Kool-Aid sit there until it's all the same throughout, but we're impatient and we stir it, right? Well, that's the same as a cell. So things won't want to go naturally from higher to lower. That's called diffusion. It's a type of passive transport, and things naturally diffuse, they call it against the gradient, naturally diffuse with that gradient from high to low until both sides are equal. Another type of passive diffusion is called osmosis. Now, it's incorrectly used a lot when we tease about it in the world, like I'm going to learn geometry by rubbing my book on my head for osmosis. Well, although that sounds funny, it's actually incorrect, right? Because osmosis means the movement of water. So you're taking water from a dried out book to put in your head? Doesn't make sense. So osmosis is the movement of water across the membrane. Diffusion, which was back here, is the movement. Remember we talked about solutions and solvents and solutes? Well, it's the movement of that solvent from one side to the other, whether it be sugar water or salt water or Kool-Aid mix. The Kool-Aid is what's diffusing. Here, for osmosis, it's not the Kool-Aid diffusing, it's the water diffusing. So sometimes with osmosis, water wants to be in balance, and usually it's going from a low concentration to a high concentration. Think about when you eat potato chips. When you eat a bag of potato chips, hopefully a small one, don't you get really thirsty after you eat something salty like that? Well, you get thirsty because the water has been diffused out of your cells into your blood where it's now all salty from you eating the chips. That's osmosis, and you want to balance that back out because now your blood's really salty, you're really thirsty, so you drink something. And putting more water back into your system helps to diffuse the water back in the cells where it wants to be so you're not dehydrated and shriveled. So that's osmosis. Again, passive, it happens naturally. One more form of passive diffusion and moving in and out of the cell is facilitated diffusion. Sorry about that. Facilitated diffusion means you have a helper helping you diffuse. So go back to the lazy river, and as you're moving, have you ever gone with children and the children decide the parent has to go faster on the lazy river where you're just comfortable floating along? Or they see the waterfall coming and the child decides, I'm going to steer my mother in front of that waterfall. Have you been there before? So as it's happening, I'm still moving forward in the rapids, but I'm being moved faster. It's being facilitated. I have a helper, right? Well, that's facilitated diffusion. So sometimes the cell needs help moving things. Well, that's where you have this big purple thing that's called a protein. Proteins do many things in cells in many parts of our body. This one type is called a membrane protein. It's in the membrane, and it helps molecules move across by diffusion. So it's called facilitated diffusion, because again, the protein is helping things move. Active transport starts from a lower concentration and goes to a higher concentration. So think about if we want to do reverse osmosis, that's what it's called. We take salt water and do reverse osmosis on it. That means we're taking salt water and we're removing the water, making it fresh water, and leaving the salt behind. That would be active transport. You're going from a lower concentration to a higher concentration, and you're moving against the grain. You're moving against the rapids, which takes a lot of energy. That would be active transport. Some things in our cells need help getting in, and they can only do it with a little extra burst of energy. Here this says Na ions. Na is sodium. So these are sodium little elements that are in here because they're charged. You see this plus, they're called ions. So we have sodium charged molecules. They can't get in the cell unless something actively is putting them in there, which requires energy. So this would be an example of active transport. We're transporting in the cell. The next two parts that are considered active transport are called exocytosis and endocytosis. There's actually 4 types of cytosises, but we're only talking in depth about 2. Exocytosis, exo sounds like exit, right? So whenever the cell needs to exit something out, like waste, it's going to go through a process called exocytosis. If anything needs to go in the cell, like the picture on the left, that's called endo. Endo means in, so going in the cell. So whatever needs to come in, the membrane can actually bud around that, pinch off, and have a little food vacuole perhaps. If anything needs to exit it, it's already in maybe a waste vacuole. It comes to the membrane, it opens up and lets it go out. So these are 2 forms of transporting really big molecules in and out of the cells. The next part, it goes through more the nucleus, where your DNA is, where it's stored, and all the little organelles, how it's all put together. Now, your DNA, it's always represented by this X, and that's a chromosome. And you have 23 pairs. So you have 2 number 1s, 2 number 2s, 2 number 3s. If you're male, you have an X and Y chromosome. If you're female, you have an X and X chromosome. So they come in pairs. Why? Because 23 of them you get from your mom's egg, and 23 you get from your dad's sperm. And when they fused together, it made you with 46 chromosomes. So you get 2 number 1s, 1 from dad, 1 from mom, 2 number 2s. So of this, let's say this is a number 2 chromosome. If we were to take it, what is it made out of? It's really tightly wound, like the perfect string you find at the yarn store before your cat gets it. So if we take a string of that and pull it out of the yarn, you'll see it's all of this wound up stuff, which is a lot of proteins. Now, they're not membrane proteins. They're a different type of protein. But this protein, if we unwind it even more, here is the actual protein within the DNA molecule. And the DNA, it's made out of letters. The letters are proteins, again, and these protein letters are A, T, C, and G, which means cytosine, guanine, thymine, and adenine. I was going to say, which one did I miss? So those letters, which are a certain type of protein, bind together, and now there's sugar on this outside this molecule and another phosphate. They're going to bind together, twist up to make DNA, wrap around proteins, wrap around tight again, and make this perfect X, and do it 46 times. So this is what DNA is. Now, if we take the DNA and make it this X shape, it's called a chromosome. If we take the chromosome and unwind it, this piece is called chromatin. Biology likes to name every little thing. So DNA and proteins build together to make a chromatin fiber, which builds together to make a chromosome, which builds together to make all of the DNA of your body. So hopefully it wasn't too confusing. So here's more nucleus as we're moving through, more of our organelles. Now that was DNA. What the heck is RNA? RNA is half of DNA. So you saw back here that DNA is this twisted kind of ladder. Well, if we would cut it in the middle and make 2 pieces, one piece would be RNA, the other piece. So this is like 2 RNAs built together to make DNA. RNA is good for making proteins of your body. Again, various proteins, whether it's hair and nails, maybe it's protein for the cell for the phospholipid bilayer and holding everything together with our protein molecules that help transport. So protein is used for many things. This is a picture which can be confusing, but when your body eats a burger and then wants to take apart that protein to build other proteins in your body, like protein from your burger is now being made to make keratin for your nails. So how that happens is your body needs directions to make other protein in your body. All the directions for your entire body and how to do things, how to make things, how to grow is in your DNA. So the DNA inside the nucleus, because it's protected, it can't leave, is cut in half to a little piece of RNA. That process is called transcription. Then the RNA can leave through this little hole called a pore, because DNA is too big, it can't leave. So RNA leaves and goes to a protein that can read it. So that's called a ribosome. Remember, ribosomes make proteins. So on here, this little ribosome, the RNA comes in contact with it. The ribosome basically reads the code for what we're making. So maybe after we ate our burger, we're going to figure out how to make keratin for our nails. So this comes, we don't need keratin for anywhere else, we just need it for our nails. So this comes out, and then how do we make keratin? Well, this little ribosome is going to figure out these directions and start making it. So those directions and reading it's called translation. It's translating what DNA said into what the ribosome could understand. So now the little protein comes over here, goes to the Golgi apparatus. They look like pancakes to me. The Golgi apparatus, where now it says, yep, this is the keratin, send it to all the nail cells and start building nails. So this whole process to take what we eat and turn it into proteins that our body needs based on DNA cookbook directions goes from transcription to translation. And I can put 2 videos up for you if needed, because those processes can be a little bit confusing. I believe there's one more thing to talk about in this chapter as this loads. Again, going through your organelles, I think the chapter does a good job of showing you these organelles. Here is a chloroplast, and in the chloroplast, remember that's only in plant cells, it helps the plant make food. And the chloroplast is like a solar membrane. What happens is these are on the very green side of leaves, not the underside where it's lighter and green, the dark green. And when sun hits this, this is like a pinball machine, and the rays from the sun bounce around on the inside of this, and they help break the energy apart, combine it with carbon dioxide, CO2, because plants breathe that in, right? And water, which they bring up from the roots, and they combine it together, making sugar, which is their food, and oxygen, which they breathe out. Again, they don't breathe, but it goes in and out of the pores and the leaves. So this is how a plant makes food through photosynthesis. Again, I'll have videos for photosynthesis to help with that. Cell respiration is how we take apart our food and make energy of it. So cell respiration, we breathe in oxygen, break down our food to recombine the proteins, the fats, the sugars to give us energy. Energy in our cell is not called energy. Energy is called ATP. And I won't ask you for the names of these, but adenosine triphosphate is the name of the molecule, and we abbreviate ATP. So the reason why you eat is not because you're hungry and you need food. The reason you eat is because your cells have run out of ATP and need more. So that process that your body breaks apart the food using oxygen and water from your body is called cell respiration. Again, another video to follow. And cell respiration takes place in this weird looking apparatus called the mitochondria. And the mitochondria has different places inside, has that membrane on the outside, the cell membrane, member, phospholipid bilayer outside. It has an inner membrane, and these are folded pieces called cristae. And this cristae is where you make energy. Now, how can I make energy sitting here and a cross-country runner make 10 times more energy surviving a 5K run? Well, it's because of this. This allows us to store and use energy as needed and makes us able to run that 5K even if we feel like we can't. I never have. So all of this goes together. Now plants have both a mitochondria and a chloroplast. So the chloroplast essentially gets the sun, the nutrients, and the carbon dioxide, breaks it all apart, sends it to the mitochondria, where then it makes energy for itself. Where we have to eat, so we don't have a chloroplast, we only have this mitochondria that helps us. So that's about it for this chapter and all the big components and topics. If you have more questions, feel free to message me. Otherwise, I'll put up some links to videos to help you with transcription, translation, and photosynthesis and cell respiration. Have a good week.